episode of The Shift is sponsored by the Ultimate Faith Store. This store carries faith-based apparel and accessories for men, women, and children. To purchase an item from the Ultimate Faith Store, please use the link attached to this episode and use the code JCamille for 10% off. Now, back to the episode, Jay. Welcome to The Shift, a podcast here to help you adjust to the new. I'm your host, Jay Camille. If this is your first time watching, be sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel, follow my Facebook page, and keep up with The Shift on Instagram. This podcast is here to help you get through anything, everything, all things new. Whether it means moving to a new city, starting a new career, getting through a new relationship, or even getting through new tough times such as anxiety and depression. So get ready, get set, and let's shift. See you guys soon. So hi everyone, it is your girl Jay Camille back on another episode of The Shift. As you all know, if you've been keeping up, we are in season 3, which is shifting out of shock. So I've been bringing in different guests, experts, authors to talk about what their shock season was and that state where they felt like they were stuck. It could have been dealing with mental illness, PTSD, cancer, whatever it was, and getting out of that season, what they did to get out so that they can encourage people like you and me and how we can get out of those states of shock. So today I'm actually really excited because we've never had anyone talk about this before on an episode, but today we are talking about a person who has survived domestic violence and abuse and how they shifted out of that and how they empowered themselves to get through it and how they are going to encourage and empower people like you and me on how we can get through our situations. And I'm actually really excited to talk about it, not only because it's something that we haven't talked about, but because something that people dealt with during the pandemic. I know a lot of people dealt with mental illness such as anxiety and depression, but oftentimes people don't talk about what happened behind closed doors, which could have been domestic violence and abuse. So we are going to talk with this person, and I'm so excited to bring her on the air. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, Sonia Frontera.
Hello.
Hi, Sonia.
Hi, good to see you.
Yes, thank you for joining us on today's episode of The Shift. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yes, I am a practicing attorney. I have been practicing law for 26 years, and I do immigration and family law. And my greatest passion is to empower people to turn their adversity into fuel for transformation. And I do that as an empowerment trainer. And I also, I'm an author. I recently published my second book, Relationship Solutions, Effective Strategies to Heal Your Heart and Create the Happiness You Deserve. And I'm also a domestic violence advocate, empowerment trainer, and counselor.
Wow. I'm excited. I mean, just listening to you, it sounds like you have a lot of passion around this, which to me means that you're going to have a lot of passion in today's episode, sharing with us these tips and advice. But one thing that you did mention, which I wanted to hone in on a little bit, because I know we talked about it during our 101, but you said you were an author of a new book, talking about relationship solutions and, creating the happiness that we deserve. Can you give us a little history on what made you write this book? And then how did you then go from writing this book to choosing to encourage others in this area?
Well, I always wanted to be a writer since I was in high school. And the stars just aligned. A few years ago, I attended a women's retreat. It was the theme was forgiveness. And I could sense that a lot of women were hurting in their relationships and their marriages, or they were still reeling from divorces, some of which had taken place years ago. And I thought this would be a really good opportunity for me to share my experience, my personal and professional experience, and use it to help people overcome the kinds of obstacles that I had myself. I am also a divorce survivor, and I was in a toxic marriage for 7 years. And the difficulties I experienced, they were very they were crushing my spirit, and it was hard to get out. And I don't want anyone to have to go through that. If I can help them have the tools and the insights and the wisdom that I have gained through my experience to help them so they can have it easier and claim the happiness they deserve.
That's awesome. And that's awesome that you were selfless enough to not just care about like you getting out of your situation, but to helping other people get out of theirs. That's amazing. And we thank you for that. And again, I thank you for coming on the air today to talk about this. So would you say, because you were at this writers conference and they were talking, or not writers conference, women's conference, and they were talking about forgiveness, would you say that forgiveness is key in what we are going to talk about today, in terms of encouraging ourselves in these situations?
Forgiveness is the portal to the future. Without forgiveness, you can't move on. And regardless of what happened in the relationship, if you don't forgive, if you don't let go of the hurts of the past, if you don't forgive yourself for what are perceived to be any wrongs that you have committed in your relationship, without any of that, you can't move on. And it's really important, because when we don't forgive, we're the ones who suffer. It's not the other person. We go around carrying these hurts that don't let us move on and keep us stuck, carrying the hurt forever.
That's good. That's good. And that's really good, because in this season, we're talking about shifting out of shock, which is really a season where most people feel like they're stuck in something. And I feel like if you feel as though you're stuck in relationships or friendships and how to deal with those people moving forward, like you just said, forgiveness is the portal to the future. So you have to learn how to forgive. Oh my gosh, that's really good. So leaning or going on after that, you talked about being a survivor of domestic violence and abuse. At what point did you realize you were in this type of relationship, and how long did it take for you to get out of it?
Talk about shock. I mean, 24 hours after the wedding, I married someone with whom I was very much in love, and we dated for 3 years. And then within 24 hours of the wedding, he just turned against me right on our way to the honeymoon on the plane. He told me everything was going to change, and he became very verbally abusive on the plane. And it was devastating to me because I never saw this coming. And the shock and the fact that I come from a conservative culture, a conservative family, and I'm also Catholic, which is a religion that doesn't really approve of divorce. It was very difficult for myself to get out. And I divorced like almost 7 years into the marriage. It took me that long to empower myself to get out.
Wow. Okay. So wait, now we need a little bit of background, or at least I do, because I'm that person. So 24 hours, you said after that was when you realized that like it was a switch. So how long did you all date? Like, did you have any like hint of maybe this person would be like this, or would you just say maybe blinded by love, or you know what I mean?
No, I think I was blindsided. I really didn't see this coming. And what people don't realize is that this is not unusual when it comes to toxic relationships, because typically the abusive partner waits until they kind of feel they have some control over you before they show their true colors. And when you marry a Catholic girl, now you know you have her because you know she can't divorce. So he waited until after the wedding to do this.
Wow. Wow, that's awful. But I mean, something I guess for listeners, especially if you're like single and you want relationship, to be aware of how you carry yourself, be aware of the people that pursue you, and their reasons for pursuing you. Because like you said, I mean, him knowing you were Catholic, he knew most likely that he had you hooked. So that's crazy. And then even crazier to me that you knew within one day, okay, I'm not supposed to be here. But it took you, I'm just going to say 2,100 because you said 7 years, and I'm going to say 300 times 7. I don't feel like doing the extra math in between. But it took you at least over 2,100 days to realize I have to get out of this. Wow.
And it's not that you don't realize that you need to get out. Is how do you do it when you don't have an exit strategy, when you have you would face family opposition, when your religion is really important to you and you feel that you will be excluded from it if you were to end your marriage. So these are the considerations that kind of keep you in ambivalence mode.
Yeah.
Even though you know that this is not a viable relationship.
No, exactly. So even I guess piggybacking after off of that, were there ever days where you questioned your desire to leave, or or you thought about settling and staying as you were planning your exit strategy? Did you ever think, you know what, maybe I should just stay. Maybe I should just do what they're telling me to do, or follow what the tradition of the religion says and stay here. Like, what did you do to get yourself out of those like questioning days and be resolved in what you decided? And then
Wait.
at what point did you finally make that leap for yourself to say, this is what I'm going to do?
Well, one thing that I invite you and all the listeners to consider is that when it comes to toxic relationships and domestic violence, the abuser engages in certain dynamics that are unique to this type of relationship. For example, there's what is called the cycle of violence, where they do the bad things and then they pretend to be contrite and remorseful, and I'm so sorry and I love you so much and it will never happen again. And then there's a honeymoon period and then something happens again. So you are just going back and forth between Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, so to speak, because they have the capacity to be nice and to be loving, and they're typically very charming. And you want to hang on to the guy that brings you flowers and is romantic and is loving and with whom you have fun. And you wish you could get rid of the other aspects. But the reality of it is, and you come to terms with it down the line, is that even these changes are unsustainable. And I came to terms with that. At one point I said, I can't do this anymore. And he's like, oh no, I'm going to change. Everything's going to be fine. And there was a period of peace, but it was only 1 year. And I realized, you know what, this is not going to happen. This is not going to happen long term. I need to think of myself. So I went through the trouble of empowering myself so that I would have the resolve to do it. And I could face also the opposition I would have from my family and my faith.
Yeah, that's good. So how did you empower yourself? And then at what point in those 7 years, because how you mentioned there was a year of peace, at what point in those 7 years were you like, nope, this is what I'm going to do. I need to take this leap and exit this for good. And then after you exited, how did you then decide, I'm going to use this to encourage others?
Well, first of all, I worked with a counselor. I think when you're in a toxic relationship, you really can't do this alone. And I didn't want my family to realize what was going on. So I really didn't have the support systems. I had no place to go. Like most people have family in their area, and I didn't have that advantage. So I worked with a counselor to help me empower myself. That was one part of it. But the other thing that really worked to my advantage was going to school. I found myself 25 at the age of 25. I was in a bad marriage. I was in a terrible job too. I felt like my life was at a dead end at a very young age. And I decided to go back to school. And I started law school, and I divorced my last semester of law school. Now, I realize not everybody's going to go to law school if they're in an unhappy relationship or in a toxic marriage. But what I recommend is that follow your bliss and your purpose and try to engage in something that is going to give you a future. And for me, being in school was so healing because it was giving me the opportunity to start all over in a new profession. It offered me a new social circle. I was out of the house. I was working full time. I was going to school at night. And it was a buffer. It kept me away from my abusive husband. So that worked really well for me. And at one point, as I was getting stronger, and he was not physically abusive, he was psychologically abusive, which is psychological abuse is very painful as well, because people don't realize what you're going through, and it's very disconcerting. However, once you get to that point where you realize that it's just words, you realize what the game is. Once you develop that awareness that this person does not really have the control they pretend to have on you, it's a lot easier to move on and to not pay mind. It's like I put it this way, like, for instance, if a 3-year-old tells you you're ugly or you're stupid, how are you going to take it? Are you going to be distraught? So if you think about it in those terms, they just, like, it stops having the same effect that it did at the beginning. And that's how it worked for me. And it just got to a point when he just yelled at me in a subway car in Austria. And I said, you know what? It's bad enough that this is happening behind closed doors. This is not going out into the world. And I said, this is it. The moment we got back to the United States, I said, you know what? I can't go on this way. It's over.
Wow. Good for you, though. And that's good that, like, you did all of these things to empower yourself from, like, you know, education. And like you said, okay, maybe for someone, it might not be law school for them, but whatever it is that is your passion, your dreams, your desires, you said, I'm not going to just wait around and not do anything for myself. Like, and as you did that, it helped you to remove yourself from your abuse. So that's amazing. Kudos to you for doing that and for realizing that. And then honestly, even for encouraging the listeners to do that, because I think in this shifting out of shock, shifting out of stuck that we were talking about in this season, a lot of people aren't thinking to do those things. Some people are. So some people, as you've seen during the pandemic, they're starting new businesses, they're starting new social media platforms to really, like, empower themselves in other areas. But there are a lot who are still stuck. And it's like, you know, utilize this time of technology, this time of, you know, when the pandemic is still kind of in between, and get yourself out there, do what it is that's your heart's desire and your passion. Like, why are you waiting around on it? And especially for a lot of places, because I know we're global on the shift, but in the US, at least, there's been given, like, government assistance through finances and everything to empower you to do those things. So why not take advantage of it?
Absolutely. I think the pandemic is offering new opportunities to rethink what's important to us. I think it's an excellent opportunity to learn your lessons from the pandemic and build on them.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's like, you know, and use your downtime wisely, because I think a lot of people, and myself included, I had got hooked a minute on social media and TikTok and Netflix and all these different things, because I'm like, oh, I'm at home, I have time to do it. And it's not to say that those things aren't great for leisure, but it's like, or you could also be using chunks of your downtime to really seed into yourself. Like, you realize, okay, I'm going to, you know, put things into myself, because if you don't do it for yourself, who else will?
That's right.
Who else is going to fight for you? And then I also love, which I think this is important, and it's something that I've been learning myself, and I've talked to listeners about it on almost every episode now. And I don't do it on purpose. Usually the guests talk about it, but I love that you talked about therapy and counseling, because whatever you're going through, shifting out of this state alone already is not easy. So why do it alone when you don't have to? Like, get the therapy, the counseling, the help that you need. And I love that you talked about it, because there were times when I was going through my state of fighting depression and anxiety with what I was going through. I didn't want to talk to my family. Like, I'm like, how can I bring this to them? I just didn't want to talk to them about it. And I didn't want to make them feel bad for me. I didn't want to all these different things and thoughts. I'm like, I can't admit it to my family or my friends or my close loved ones. And I did find those answers in therapy and in counseling. So I 10 out of 10 agree with you that it is important to do. And listeners, please check it out, especially because there are some free therapists and counselors out there. All you have to do is look it up.
That's right. Yeah, and that's one thing that people think is makes getting counseling difficult. But you can reach out to your local organizations and your local universities that have psychology programs, because that's what I did. I went to Catholic Charities, and my schools had grad students who offer therapy, and they were wonderful. So don't give up on yourself.
Yeah, definitely. So, based on your book title and then your personal mission, I've heard you chime in here and there about happiness. What are some small things that we can do to empower ourselves, whether we're in a relationship or not, to choose happiness?
The first thing you need to do is to recognize that you deserve to be happy. I mean, without that, there's no way. You know how the song goes and the saying goes, life's a bitch, then you die. And you think life is supposed to be difficult, but no, life is supposed to be joyful. And you have a right to be happy. And not only do you have a right to be happy, you are responsible for creating that happiness. It's not your partner. And likewise, you're not responsible for creating happiness for your partner. And thirdly, you can create your happiness on your terms. It's your happiness. It's your flavor of happiness. Find out what is it that makes you tick and pursue it with a passion, and you will create it. It is a choice. It's a mindset.
Absolutely. I agree. I had some neighbors that were talking to me one time, and it's a married couple, and the wife was talking to me about like using singleness and encouraging other singles to like be happy and to figure out those things right now that make me happy. She's like, because there's going to be a time where you have a family and, you know, they're always relying and depending on you, or your spouse is depending on you. And then you're going to miss out on those things that made you happy. And she's like, so why not choose it now? And then even once you learn it in this season when you're by yourself, well, then on those moments where you want to break from your family, you know what to revert to that's going to bring you that happiness. Because like you said, no one else can bring you that happiness but yourself. Not your spouse, not your kids, not anyone else. They can add to it, but they can't directly bring you that happiness.
Well said. I agree.
Yeah. So after undergoing this experience, how did you then, because speaking of happy, we talked in our 101 and you are now happily remarried. And is it 14 years? Did I get that right?
Yes. 14 years. Counting. Yes. So what I say to people is like, your divorce or your problems in your relationships are not the end of the world. They're just a detour on the way to happiness.
Absolutely. And so when we talk about like this happiness and you experiencing that in your new marriage, so which has turned out to be successful and is successful, how can you use the story, your story, to encourage others to try again? Because I think in this state of shock and stuck, people think that this is the end all be all, whether it's relationship or careers. They're like, oh, this is the choice I make. This is my lot in life. This is what I have to deal with. And, you know, after choosing to get out of that situation, what then pushed you to try again?
Well, I decided I was going to enjoy myself right after my divorce. And I had 4 blissful years, and I met new people, and I was taking on hobbies that I had never done before. I was a very active hiker. And then when I felt fulfilled, when I was very joyful, then I had something to bring to a relationship. And that's what I recommend people do. Work on yourself. Get to enjoy your own company so that you don't rely on another relationship to fill a void, to validate you, to make you feel that you are complete or you're acceptable in society, because you're supposed to be part of a couple. So enjoy your company first. Love yourself. And when you do, then your point of attraction is going to be different. You're going to be a happy person who can create something wonderful with someone who is also happy and secure. So get over your ex, work on yourself, and then venture out.
I love that. Yeah, there were so many nuggets you just dropped in there. I'm trying to figure out where I want to start. But I love that you took that time to heal for yourself. And even today, as we're talking about going from heartache to healing, first you mentioned forgiveness, but then I also love that you talked about doing and finding happiness for yourself and like really pulling away to find those things that bring you joy and not letting someone else come and fill that void, because one, they don't have the capacity to, but then two, that's unhealthy. It's unhealthy for you and it's unhealthy for them. So I love that you did that. Was there, in your mind, did you tell yourself, oh, I'm going to give myself X amount of time until I put myself on the market again? Or were you just like, I'm just going to continue to seek happiness and joy for myself until I feel like I'm fulfilled?
It's funny because I was having a really good time, and I wasn't looking for a boyfriend when I met my husband. I was actually looking for an activity partner. I guess I was looking for a guy to carry my bags when I traveled and a traveling companion. And I fell for him. I liked him. And before I met him, I had another friend, and he was looking for more than just a friendship. And when I met my husband, I realized he was a keeper. I said, you know what? I think I will keep this one and just settle. Settle down, not settle as in like settling. This is,
Okay.
this is what showed up. No. He was a keeper.
Nice. Wow. That's awesome. Good for you. Okay. Well, Sonia, we're going to take a quick pause before we come back for our last question. We're going to hear one more word from our sponsor, and then we will wrap it up. Today's episode of The Shift is sponsored by the Ultimate Faith Store. This store carries faith-based apparel and accessories for men, women, and children. Their foundation scripture is Matthew 17:20, which reads, "Faith can move mountains." Up to 15% of all purchases are donated to charities, small communities, and people in need around the world. To purchase an item from the Ultimate Faith Store, please use the link attached to this episode and the code JCamille for 10% off. Now, back to you, Jay. So, Sonia, which I'm so sad that this is like time for us to wrap up, because this has been such a great dialogue. Honestly, I don't feel like I'm doing an interview. I just feel like we're just having a conversation back and forth, and I'm getting to learn a little bit more about you and then what you did to fight out of this situation that you were in, which honestly, it's awesome. It's awesome to hear. Most of the time when people hear about domestic violence and abuse, it doesn't always have a happy ending. And yours is remarkable. It's truly a testimony. So I'm just excited that we got to share this moment with you today. But what are 3 tips or pieces of advice that you would give to someone tuning in?
Like I said, you can create your happiness and go for it. And the happiness comes from within. Cultivate it in yourself. And seek the joy. Use your imagination and your creativity and your passions, because the keys to empowerment and happiness and a sense of fulfillment are self-awareness, self-expression, and self-love. Love yourself and do what brings you joy, and take baby steps in that direction. It's not a huge project that should overwhelm you. It is something that you work on and build on day by day, and you will find that in the end it's worth it, and you will get what you want to create if you are intentional about it.
That's awesome. So I do have one quick sidebar question off of that, Sonia, because this came to my mind as we were talking and just now. So how do you not feel selfish for doing those things?
It is not selfish, because you're doing it to build yourself up so you have more to share, so you can be a more loving, more satisfied person, and you have something to give to others. You can't give from an empty cup. And if you deplete yourself just taking care of others at the expense of yourself, you're just going to end up building resentment towards others, and it's really going to affect your relationships and your sense of worth, self-worth. and how you feel about the people around you. So now take care of yourself, but not in a way that's selfish. Try to include people in your decisions, and try to build yourself up so that you can be more loving and you can be more giving.
That's good. That's good. No, I love that you hit on that. And I already like innately knew the answer, but I wanted a listener to actually like truly get that and not feel bad for choosing themselves. Really the part that you said, you can't pour from an empty cup. That is so, so, so true. And I have a great friend who mentioned it to me once, and he said, you don't pour from your cup, you pour from your saucer, which means as you fill yourself up, then it overflows. And so underneath your cup is your saucer, which is the overflow. And then you pour from that saucer into other people so that it never leaves you empty. So yes, that's so good. We're on the same page.
We are.
Yes. Well, Sonia, please tell our listeners where we can follow you on social media and how we can stay connected with you.
Yes, the best way to stay connected is visit my website, soniafrontera.com, and there you will find links to all my social media on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook. You can join my private Facebook group and sign up for my newsletter and get some freebies. There's some gifts there too for your viewers and listeners.
Oh, I heard freebies. Yes, we're definitely going to check it out. Well, Sonia, again, thank you for joining us on the air, on the shift. That is all from me. I'm Jay Camille, and I will see you all next week. From me, I'm Jay Camille. Be sure to follow us on social media. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and I will see you all next week.